Hey there, it's Isha, Intimacy Alchemist. Hi, Rompe Reglas. I'm going to be inviting Lee from Ozo Ombro to join. All right, here we go.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, well, I can hear you a little bit. Yeah, it feels a little bit dampened.
Is it dampened?
Yeah, your voice is very low.
Even with this? Huh. Is it really bad? Is it really bad?
I'm straining a little bit to hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what to do because these are the headphones
Okay.
that actually plug in. I guess I can just take the headphones out?
Yeah, try it without the
Yeah.
headphones for a second, and you can always pop them back in.
Okay, how's this?
It's the same.
It's the same?
Yeah.
Oh, um, hi Eden. We're troubleshooting.
Yeah, we're just tech trouble. It's okay if I just lean in a little bit, I can hear you just fine.
But I wonder, it's really so weird. Eden, can you hear me okay? I'm wondering, we're trying to get a read if you can drop in the comments on whether or not you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm navigating
Okay,
technology.
wonderful. Okay, yeah, as long as
Okay.
people can hear you, that's fine. Yeah.
All right. I'm literally putting Isha and my phone in a teacup. Can y'all hear me? In the
Awesome.
teacup? The teacup is not interfering with the IG experience. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Good. Good to
Oh my
go.
gosh. That took a little too long. I think we're both like having, I don't know, it's like it's not foreplay. It's like we couldn't even get to the foreplay aspect of this whole thing because we're like, like I can't even get technology to work. My whole brain goes offline. Is like we can record it on Zoom. We can talk about all this, and I'm like, I have no idea what we're doing. Okay, so we're here.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for joining us. And yeah. So so we're just gonna delve into random topics. And just as you came on today, we were just before we started troubleshooting, talked about accessing different spaces and what we mean by that and what it's like to talk about those things.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it also goes in line with the fact that I've gone completely nonverbal in my communication with people. Like, I'm not a good texter right now. I don't feel like I said this to some other people. I'm like, I don't feel like a good friend right now. I can't actually talk about anything that's happening and nothing feels right to talk about. Like, I don't even know how to write anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel like it's because things are shifting so much in my own reality that it's like I don't even know how to apply language the way that I used to.
Yeah.
And like the love is there, like I feel love, but I'm like, if you can't feel me, feel my love, then I can't communicate it otherwise. Like there's
Yeah.
no way I can wordsmith my way into like expressing with poetry or like just like even sentimentality feels inaccessible to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like what you're talking about is that you're accessing like really deep cellular intuitive spaces, and that's like the word words don't exist there. It's images and sensation and feeling.
Right. Yeah. And it's nonverbal, it's pre-verbal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How have you been experiencing, I don't know, the past weeks, I think, even March?
Well, March was a shit show for me, and that was really about like me just stepping up my pleasure game and just keeping my head above water so that I can shut the fuck up for whatever's happening. But I think in the last weeks, it's like just kind of coming down off of that. I've been just in a massive up level, and really having to, like, like I'm thinking about a membrane right now of like pushing through. I don't want to call them blocks, but places where I know I need to extend into, and I'm pushing it like a membrane. And so I can feel the tension there of like pushing and feeling the tension of the self-doubt of, can I do this? Like I'm feeling like I can't, but I know that I can. And that tension, rubbing up against that tension, knowing that I can, pushing against the part that is like, I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
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 Where I'm at right now. And
Like,
today
yeah.
I broke through it. Like part of the reason I'm so like bubbly and like today on fire is because I feel like I pushed either past the membrane or the membrane broke. And I'm just like, yes, I'm a fuck yes today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah, just kind of like, you know, I've been doing what I do for a long time. And I think that for me, the struggle is to talk about, like, it comes back to this conversation of like talking about things that are not verbal, talking about embodiment, which isn't a verbal experience, it's a sensational experience. And yes, there are beliefs in the body, but how do we address those? Because they are, again, sensations.
Yeah.
Our brain has a corresponding narrative that goes with that, and maybe I can talk about that, but that's not how I experience it. My mental narratives don't run like that. Like I don't even pay attention to them anymore. It really is about this membrane. That's a felt experience. It's not something that's happening in my brain.
Yeah, I think we're in trouble if we pay too much attention to, like, I mean, I think that's also all of the purpose of like somatic work is you're kind of, I've put it as like decoupling, like you're literally trying to decouple your intellectual and your emotional
Yeah.
body experiences. So you're actually creating some separation between the conclusions your mind is drawing about a sensation that's happening in your system that is like telling you that this is wrong. I mean, it's such a cliche, but it's like your body is saying something's not safe, but is it? And then your mind is like, fuck you. I mean, my mind is like that. I like if I try to cross analyze myself in that, I just so all I've got is like all I've got is the attunement. That's it. And
Yeah.
it's almost like if other people are on actually like on board with those practices, like I can't afford to onboard people to the language, the like the internal language. Like if I'm speaking really abstractly and people are constantly asking me like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like every I'm like, I don't know. Like I want to go back to like, well, 8 years ago, like I went through this massive like dissolution of self that like I had no words for, but it was almost like a messiah complex because I felt like I knew how everything worked, but I couldn't explain it to anybody. I mean, I don't know if everybody goes through that, but it's just like you start to talk about it and then you start trying to map out the history of that in your own body. People are either going to be like, either they're not there yet, like maybe they haven't come to that particular metabolic point yet, and they're not going to know what you're talking about. It's not going to be useful for them to hear your explanation of your own shit show, or like people get it. Like I feel like there's kind of, not to draw as like two camps or anything like that, but I feel like there's kind of before and after. There's a before and after nature to this work that isn't exactly chronological. Like we experience the before and after constantly, but we just get better at navigating it in a sense. That feels really abstract, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm actually, funny that you mentioned this onboarding process. I'm actually creating a course from like other material that I had put together of onboarding people onto the language.
Yeah.
Just to kind of provide like these are the frameworks I work within. Like these is my dancing space, right? This is the room I dance in. And so it really, yeah, it really helps develop a language for the thing that doesn't have words. You
Right.
know, much like, it's almost like bookending things, like providing like padding around
Right.
an experience.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and we need that. Like I think maybe it just comes from like postpartum training courses and like learning about more about birth work and things like that. I always see that as this strategy of having, you know, I don't know, there was something that was communicated a lot about creating kind of secondary containment
Mhm.
for a gestation process or for a, I mean, the protection of like the parent-child dynamic, like the dyadic experience after birth. Like that's, I mean, that's like a physicalized birthing process, but we're, you know, obviously birthing in other ways. So like if we're going through these massive existential collective reality shifts that are extremely disturbing because, you know, we've got experiences of genocide, we have all sorts of things happening in the news, we have digital media to navigate, like, you know, I could probably go on and on. I wouldn't be able to list all of the things that we're having to navigate right now. But to create secondary containment for ourselves to actually be in the experience of how those sensations are arising. Like I was watching the news the other day and I feel like it actually put me in in almost like a, I wouldn't say like, it put me in a state where it was just like I could feel my whole body curving inward because I was like going into this protection mode, but I was also feeling like I really needed to pay deep attention to everything that was sequencing in my system because of the triggers of watching what was on the news. And it's like the secondary containment is like the way we somatically language things through our body. Like we're not speaking it. It's not a language we speak, it's a language we embody.
Yeah.
And it's a sequencing and there's a syntax to somatics that, and it's not just somatics. I mean, somatics is a general term, but there's a syntax to creating secondary containment for moving through reality.
How do you define secondary containment?
Like I mean, the image in my head is literally like a womb space. Like you have like a placenta and you have the womb space. Or like even with your brain, you have multiple layers as well. Like I'm not great on anatomy. It's not something I studied, but like way back when I was a kid, I think I was aware of like this idea. There's like the dura mater around the brain, and then there's like the skull, and like we have like to have this sort of understanding that all, you know, it's not even about walls, but it's about like containment. It's like everything needs protection, and there's like almost like a chain linking of protection of like concentric circles almost.
Mm-hmm.
I would maybe concentric circles, like emanating concentric circles is sort of a good way of looking at it from a geometric perspective.
Yeah.
But you can see it replicated in the natural function of our bodies. Like we have, you know, skin, and we also have microbiomes, and you know, like there's a lot of complexity to the way we're seamed into our environment.
Yeah. 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 And even thinking about the energy field as a form of like
Yeah.
containing the like the physical body, right? Like
Right.
organized physical body.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're like frequencies that created your liver that were genetically like emerged genetically. Like you come from sort of like a frequency and a sequencing process. And in order for that to take place, there needs to be certain conditions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so my mind, as you're saying that, my mind is also jumping to like when we experience up love, right? Like your liver said, like your liver comes in with a specific frequency, like we are like you are going through, we go constantly through upgrades and up levels, right? And
Yeah.
like what happens to our body when that's happening, like energetic upgrades, and how those processes do need that containment, do need the protection to, right, to be birthed, right? Because that's the process of being like stripped and
Yeah.
renewed,
Yeah.
right? Stripped down, like you're in the cocoon, you melt the fuck down, and then you come out again.
Right. Which is sort of speaking to the function of mentorship and the function of like being in containers, like from the, our industry perspective or whatever it is that we're in from an economic level, like the way that nature, I'm going to be really loose with language, frequencies out in terms of financial structure is like how we pay for containment and who we move our money to for containment, and to have like those network structures in a sense, like to work with people in moments of time for like to actually bid in, like opt in for secondary containment in
Mm-hmm.
order to transform, to be held in transformation.
So you're right. So you're talking about mentorship being part of the cocoon that supports or that enables a like a safe melting down and reformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, and most people in Western, we're going to say Western, I don't know a better word right now. Um, like as far as like for me growing up as an American in this particular society that I grew up in, like whatever that local society was, I didn't have mentorship, and that turned into psychosis. Like I didn't actually have people bringing me up and giving me containment and language for my experiences, and it eventually developmentally bubbled up into psychosis.
Right. Right.
So, what's kind of fortunate and unfortunate, fortunate is that it was a learning process, that I survived it, and there's a learning process. But I mean, it is unfortunate not to be held. And everything about my current life has been a really intentional ask for who am I meant to work with right now? Who is an elder, who is a mentor, who is a teacher for me, who can offer me and chain link me into something bigger than my ego understanding, to help bypass some of those protective mechanisms.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've like after years, I've been able to hone it down. Like I'm working with somebody who is just able to help me really refine my process. And that's like healing. It amplifies how quickly your learning processes are when you have that support and that help. And we're in such a strange time because it's like, the way my mentor has put it is like, people are panicking because time is folding in on itself. It's like there's literally like attachments to history and attachments within collective consciousness that are literally being composted in a sense, or like, to put it really abstractly, it's like there's a composting process happening. It's a reckoning, and there's a composting happening. And there's massive grief right now. And like, I'm like losing the logical train of thought of all of that. But if I didn't have someone to hold me in like the the macro of everything that's happening, it's almost like and she's also said this, it's like she throws out a lifeline, but we're also her lifeline. It's like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
dual, it's a connection. It's like creating
Yeah.
a place for some kind of synapse to happen, if I'm using the language correctly.
Susan, we're all in the middle of it. We're all
we're
right.
we're all in it, yeah. And we can't onboard it anymore. Like there's a time that's just gone
Yeah.
for a certain way of functioning. It's just like, at least it's not available to us in the way it was.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say, Lee, that there's like this collective unraveling of concepts, structures, right? Whatever belief systems that happens to fold in. and it's all sort of like unwinding, like you pull a cable on a sweater, right? You pull a strip on a cable sweater and it sort of pulls apart. And that is also an internal process that's happening.
It is like a like, and then who's pulling the sweater is sort of like it's easy to think of like, okay, my sweater's unraveling, but there is something that unraveling is also like to understand that within. I see something like a toroidal, like a torus. Basically, it's like when something's folding in upon itself. Where is that thread going to? We don't
Mhm.
we don't actually know. It's not actually for the mind to understand that.
Mhm.
Not to
Yeah,
blow anybody out, but
no, I'm
yeah.
feeling it now. I'm having a really strange image of like I'm having a globe come in and just like the way, like sometimes the way that I make it make sense for me is that like there's it can be cosmological, it can be like the earth, something's happening with the magnetics of the earth that is all sort of like setting things up energetically, and you're experiencing like we're having these energies sort of enact act upon our energy bodies,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
relationship with earth, we have a relationship with, right, our the stars, the planets, astrology, right, whatever's happening. And so that there's a relationship happening there. There's a meeting of energies. And so we're being like basically it almost feels like we're being hit and we're like, oh, what's happening, right? And the unraveling is happening. We're having to like hold ourselves and all of that, like saying and trying to find the people and the communities and the places where we can sort of land and actually either make sense of it or have that energetic containment and maybe find the language,
Hmm.
find practices, find um, yeah, whether it's a practice, whether it's a language, whether it's a philosophy, to anchor us in something. So
Right.
we have our feet anchored in something so that we're not, but when things not contained, right, they spill out, they get like messy and we can't sort of put it together.
Yeah. And then also it's like not, I mean, like also the humility of like we're not the main players either. Like this planet and like I love so we're both in Trela's container for Speed of the Land, and Trela is amazing human being out in South Central PA who runs Phoenix Farm. Um, and you can find him at Phoenix Farm PA on IG. Um, but Trellis was talking a lot about like the earth is so much better at holding this stuff than we are. And then we like hold on so tight and we wall off and we grip and we grip and we grip and we act like we're all alone in it. And lately, you know, just having these invitations, especially like Trella pushing these invitations, like go find a spot to connect with outside, like where you are. Start building a relationship. Start seeing like what develops out of that, and like developing listening skills and centering and grounding skills. And also the whole piece around like our minds are not energetically that powerful. They're like whatever's going on up here, like we know it from, you know, because everyone talks about the Heart Math Institute. Like your heart as an energetic field is so much more powerful. So like a lot of the challenges of these practices is like, and you talk about this all the time in your work, is the mind body splits, but also like the heart pelvic split.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally like seaming together this like energy center that I always see it as like being right above my stomach, like near my solar plexus, where it's like bundle you got this bundle that is like it just wants to weave in and interconnect again, but it can really hurt, like
Yes.
reopening this area. And that's why like the body work and like bioenergetic work and movement and like plant
Breath.
medicines even and breath work and engaging that area of the body. I mean, you bring those practices into your community all the time, and you make it, you're like let's keep it simple. Like, let's alchemize this stuff. You literally have this event called Alchemize where people can just like move it out of their systems and touch into that more primal layer of understanding.
Yeah.
It's so simple, but it's so hard to access. But like really weaving that piece back together to get back in touch with heart contact and trusting the heart, the field of the heart to
Yeah.
work, not the head.
Yes. Yes. You know, and I've been really exploring too, like how powerful our minds can be if we align them, if we are like aware of what is story, if we are aware of what's conditioning, if we can sort of separate ourselves from that and have some sense of distance, being able to observe it and then access the new reality, right? You talk
Yeah.
about accessing like other worlds, other dimensions. When we can access other dimensions with our mind, but we have to do that like it takes a lot for the mind to release the corrupt concept. It really takes a lot.
It does. Yeah.
When you are able to access neurodimensionality, it's so powerful because the body responds immediately. The body's already fucking there.
Right.
The body's already tapped into wholeness.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious too. It's like I mean, I'm not responsible for anything that happens in a container. Like I'm just like, hey, you just trusted yourself. You just like if somebody is like, "Oh, I'm having this thing happen." And I'm like, you just decided to trust like something happened. Like some level of trust is being built. On some level there's like heat, an expression of heat, or there's pain, or there's tension, or there's like an awareness that's like something involuntary. It's almost like an involuntary response is like beginning to metabolize through,
Yeah.
and it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And like those embodied coaching calls that you lead and Rampe, like that's all the work. It's like, what does witnessing do? What is like that heart field do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do our bodies do together?
Mm-hmm. When we're able to drop into presence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm doing this, right? When we drop into like a heart space, right? Or when we're able to do the weaving of like, you know, I talk a lot about tracking fear in the nervous system, and I always feel like that is such a solar plexus thing. It
Yeah.
shows solar plexus, and so it's almost like the fear is what is like the knot that is preventing the heart from connecting to pelvis. It is like I'm thinking about like a wrapped up rope. Like
Yeah.
kind of pull tight, and
Right.
this solar plexus, we're afraid of judgment, we're afraid of rejection, we're afraid of criticism, we're afraid of like really opening ourselves up or showing up in a particular way or saying the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that all keeps us in that place. But when we're able to track the fear and decide like to allow something to happen, then it's miraculous because the body's like it's already a yes to that. Like
Yeah. 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 Man, I've been looking at my solar plexus for a while. I think that's been kind of the theme of it. It's like, and we talk about blocks, and I feel like there's a lot of people who talk about blocks, but whenever people talk about blocks, I don't even understand what that even means. I think about like those wood blocks that I played. I'm like, blocks? Like, I actually think of like a rectangular shape, so my brain does something with the word blocks that's like, no. But when we're actually like working with it in the body, it can register as pain.
yeah, registers as pain, fear,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
primal.
It can be like it can feel like an existential crisis or a panic attack even. It's just
Yeah.
in building capacity to stay with it.
When I was unraveling some really deep shit a couple weeks ago, I mean, it was like you saw me, like I felt like I had to move very slowly because I could feel my body was radiating with fear. It was just like the fear was just shaking out of me. I was kind of like holding myself because it was just kind of like I felt like I was just in the most micro vibrational state you can imagine. Like you couldn't see me vibrating, but I was internally, it was a whole ass
Yeah.
vibration going on. And at night, it was even stronger because like my mind is turned off and my body's like, okay, we're gonna do this work right now. And I'm like laying there screaming like, oh my God, this is so fucking high sensation. Like I just like, wow.
Yeah, no, I actually like really resonate with that state because I lived in it for a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
the, and
lived in it. Yeah. Hmm.
and the containment, going back to the containment thing, my containment was spirit at that moment. I was like,
Yeah.
ancestors, spirit, fucking somebody, like help me, help me, help me, help me get through this right now. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have phone a friend at 3 a.m. Okay, so please fucking help me through this.
Friends at 3 a.m. are not that helpful all the time. It depends on, I'm speaking, like I'm raising my hand here as the bad friend who's like, my adrenals were like, you're not going to do that. Like, don't hold space for anyone. You're already out. Like, you're out of the game right now. Deal with yourself.
And it's
Yeah.
like these experiences that we're talking about, these fucking dimensional energetic upgrades are becoming more commonplace because there is like there's a quickening.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what we're ultimately like making our way back into is like, I hate the word self-care. So it's like, it really is about like fucking showing up in devotion to those internal processes because this shit ain't stopping.
Hmm.
Like I feel like we need to fucking decide to
Yeah.
how our system works, what works for our system, like try new things, like apply, devotion, pleasure, connection, contact, support, containment, all of the things, because this is happening.
Right.
This is happening, period.
Right. And there's also a huge availability of spontaneous insights as well within that. Like, I know that we've had conversations about like when you talk about the notion of secret traditions or mystical traditions, those are accessible in certain frequency states.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily, they can they come through lineage, yes. And also lineage can be a frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain access that you can be like, again, through mentorship, sometimes it takes a mentor who's been there, and it's literally you just find another body who's been there who can kind of help you like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
because
say co-regulate, but it's not co-regulate. It's like
the energy,
it
it's like you can
yeah.
scaffold from their energy,
Yeah.
like you can sort of
Yeah.
scaffold their way, or yeah,
It's the way you learn a song. You have to hear somebody sing it.
yeah,
And it's like to do that, to find other people who are holding certain frequencies in their body. It's like this stuff is not going to come through some sort of rigid systematic, which is like very ends up being very patriarchal anyway, and the way that it registers to our minds. It's like, it's coming from one direction and you honor and you devote yourself to that direction. It's like for a lot of us it's not that clear. For people who are holding like multiple diasporic identities, it's not that clear. So when you're culling information through practice and devotional practices, you're literally in this like, oh God, you're like recapitulating through practice and you're editing through practice what is working, what's not working, and you're sort of titrating. It's like take everything with a grain of salt. Like you're always protecting yourself. You're always like keeping that circle of protection around, like you're receiving what information can be assimilated safely in that moment, and you're just constantly expanding through that. I mean, ideally, I think that's like, I have this very idealistic image of what healing can look like, which I don't actually think that's a reality for a lot of us, but I'm not sure if any of that made sense. Yeah.
yeah, it does.
Hmm.
Just want to like, we should probably like sort of wrap it up,
Yeah.
time and stuff. But what I was thinking of, like why this is happening, right? We had spoken earlier about like why this is happening, and sort of there are certain energetic frequencies, like some energetic frequencies are like there's some sort of higher vibration happening, and that vibration is interacting with our bodies. And I was just thinking about like the way that I experience it, like when I tap into my ancestors and sort of why this is happening and sort of like how I'm feeling it in my body is like when my body meets that frequency or whatever, it my body can't hold on to the shit. It can't hold on to the shit that's no longer working. Like it's like
Right.
it's having diarrhea. It's like energetic diarrhea.
Or being in a centrifuge. With, I was gonna get really crude there and bring the diarrhea, but
Yeah, because it's like all of a sudden I'm like, and it's like my
yeah,
body wants to vomit it out. Like
totally.
can't hold on to it. It's incongruent when those two energies come together. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's how want to invite people to think of it. It's like sometimes, and sometimes it's very intense, high sensation. You feel like you're going crazy, and like you say, you build that containment, whether it's through like fucking staging yourself or praying or moving or screaming or hiking in the woods, whatever it happens to be for you, or getting mentorship, but to have that supporting space where, right, you can learn to contain yourself. If you can't do it on your own, having someone support you in you containing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you need someone to hold you first.
Yeah.
Every now and then I kind of wonder if I need to go back into that kind of holding because there may be pieces I can't touch into on my own. But I think having been held in groups, having been held by individuals was probably some of the most valuable. Like you can't replace that kind of support when you have, I mean, I'm going to speak to like industry terms like bioenergetic practitioners, somatic practitioners, but specifically bioenergetics is really interesting because it's like in that Reichian lineage, like literally talking about erotic life force, like talking about all the taboo stuff that got erased when we went in the Freud direction. Like, I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying this, but I there's something. It was, I'm going to just say this last thing. It was like what kind of blew my mind was like way back before I even knew what bioenergetics was. I think I ended up meeting a friend. I like was traveling in China for a short period of time, and I met a friend in Shanghai who was actually practicing Reiki and therapies. And I didn't know what it was until hindsight when I started doing them. I'm like, what is this person talking about? They do like a 15-minute, 20-minute process, and it's like what does that even mean? Because for me as a breath worker, I'm like, well, you have to do it, you have to breathe for at least an hour. Like how effective could it possibly be? But with bioenergetics, sometimes the transformation can be almost instantaneous once you key in the person into that particular frequency that they're needing to access. It can take only like a few minutes, and then all of a sudden like everything just
It just
purges. Yeah,
right? It's like
it
calm.
drops. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
totally.
powerful. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we're doing this. I guess we're doing this every week. We're just
Yeah.
gonna blab at
We're just
you.
gonna lab and just go like fucking vibration, energy, zero dimensional on you.
We're gonna be your super
Yeah.
annoying. I want to say auntie. I accept the term auntie. I want to be like a super annoying trans mask auntie
That's
that talks energy and tells you to go sit and learn from a tree. Oh my gosh. I think you're one of the only people who will sit with me. Like, well, not one of the only people, but I feel like, you know,
Mhm.
I'm glad you invited me to do this because I was scared.
Yeah. Awesome. Mwah.
All
Love
right.
you.
Bye, folks.
All right. Bye, everybody.